you guys would be alright if I did an additional video about this. And the answer came back with a resounding, we don't really watch your videos, mate, I don't care. So I thought I'd do it anyway. So the Derailed Ingrid in the Helix is a stupid name, isn't it? Derailed Ingrid, what has that got to do with the Trainwreck? However, Trainwreck, derailed, and it turns out that the Ingrid is the actual model that Line 6 had in to work on, which was a 1992 Trainwreck Express. I know this because you can kind of Google it, and I spoke to someone from Line 6. Anyway, so back along in the days of Ustream, Dan Bull is the kind of CEO, owner, amp maker from 65 Amps, and there's a video still on YouTube of him demoing the actual amp that was for sale back then. I think this must have been sort of 9 years ago, maybe a little bit more. The guy who owned that amp at the time was called Don, and he was trying to sell this amp, the Ingrid, and there's a whole like 2-hour video of Dan, presumably slightly drunk or something, playing through the amp with a Les Paul, playing through it with a Strat, and playing through it with like a Jazzmaster type thing, and a thing with P90s as well. And he seems to really like the amp. It's a little bit noisy. I think you can't really see the controls on the amp. He does talk about sometimes where he's got the drive on it, but I think it's really super cool that we can kind of trace that back, and that's why it's called Ingrid, because basically Ken Fisher used to name his amps different things. You know, there's the Francesca, there are other names, I can't remember any of the other names, and this one's called Ingrid. Apparently, I don't know if this is true, someone may know or they may not, chances that anyone watching this video will know this, I guess, but apparently this could be completely bollocks. Ken revoked the warranty on that particular amp because the original owner made a couple of tweaks or like modifications and then modified them back. Don't know whether that's true or not, and obviously I don't think the warranties for Trainwrecks is particularly useful anymore. Sorry, Ken. So yeah, the Derailed Ingrid, worth a look, based on one specific Trainwreck. There were about 100 Trainwreck amps built whilst Ken was alive, and I imagine maybe like a third of them were the Express, a third of them were the Liverpool, and a third of them would have been the Rocket, or something like that. Maybe the Rocket there's less of. I don't know the exact numbers, but you've got to think that this is probably one of the rarest amps on the Helix, and it's pretty cool, I think, to know a little bit of that backstory, and hopefully we'll have flashed up some images there that are of that amp. And there's a reverb listing which you can still see of the amp, and it was up for about £30,000 or whatever that is in US dollars, and I think it looks really pretty. Trainwreck amps didn't have handles, which is not particularly useful, is it? But yeah, so that's a little bit of the story on that. Now let's just jump in. I'll show you some of the tones that I got up as a result of that video. In the video, Dan talks about Billy Gibbons being one of the guys who uses the Trainwreck. He plays like Van Halen, and he plays a bit of Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. Just kind of classic rock stuff, really. I think Brad Paisley was also a chap who used Trainwrecks in the past, which would explain why he has a signature Dr. Z amp, which is based on a Trainwreck. So, throughout the video, you know, he kind of messes around with the drive, but at one point he has the drive all the way up at 7, and he had kind of this slightly woolly lower end. So I've tried pushing the bass up and the mids up, bringing the treble and the presence down. This particular Trainwreck does have a presence control, and the bright switch I've left off because it didn't necessarily sound super bright. The other thing, he's using a Marshall cab, and he's talking about Roya as if they sponsored the thing, so I decided to use the 160 ribbon, close mic'd, but I've also brought the high cut down because it sounds like maybe it's you know, quite off axis or something. It sounds quite dark, really, and so this ended up sounding like this with a Strat. Now, you'll know one of my kind of things that I like to talk about on this amp is this bright switch. At the very end of the parameters, I've talked about this before, and this gives you the ability to kind of dial in a little bit more brightness and clarity, and also make it so the amp cleans up potentially a bit better. And the other thing that's cool about it, bring this back up to 8. As you bring the drive back down, even at 3.5, we've got quite a driven amp really. And if you take this drive down to 2, you're going to still have a bit of drive on the real amp. Kind of down there in Vox territory, I think. Yeah, so keep this drive kind of lower, and I think you can. So yeah, I think keep that down nice and low, the gain, for some kind of Vox inspired tones. I think don't be afraid to use that bright switch, and I think also you can keep things fairly dark with that bright switch as well, relatively, you know, the treble down at 2.7 and 2.5. As you bring those up to kind of where they were stock, get a bit more jangle, a bit more kind of clang. You keep those lowish, and then as you bring up the drive, which there is an insane amount of drive on this amp, even Dan comments on the real one, you get into kind of fuzzy territory there as well. And you know, that's where I'd start if I'm using that amount of gain, to take off some of these highs, just to kind of neaten it up a bit. Sorry, can't play this morning, but that bright switch there can give you a little bit more kind of like string clarity when you're playing those chords. Anyway, that's just some stuff that kind of excited me to learn about this particular amp. So the Trainwreck Express Ingrid from 1992, that's what this model is based on. That's the amp that Line 6 were working on when they were modelling it. You know, that's the amp that you can see on Reverb, that's the amp that Dan Ball was playing. And, you know, it's kind of here in model form. I think it sounds great. The actual owner of the Ingrid said they didn't do a particularly good job. But that is kind of the thing you hear from a lot of people about Trainwreck amps. You know, if you're the guy who's protecting your investment, potentially you don't want people to think that there's a good model of it out there. But yeah, I think it's probably, I don't know, it's becoming my favourite model in the Helix. You can go all the way from kind of Vox jangle to insane amounts of drive and kind of sounds insane. Thank you for stopping by. Hopefully that was okay. I just wanted to share some of that information with you because I was kind of excited to know about some of that stuff. So yeah, Derailed Ingrid, check it out. Feel free to like and subscribe if you wanted to. Cheers.